crimes. And it was this great review until you get to the very end. And he talks about my 6 solutions as small bore. And you could take that as an insult, but I'm going to take that as my flag I carry around, which is these are no big deal.
Right.
I mean, he said they're small bore, the guy who wrote Den of Thieves, right? So, so there's 6 of them, and I'll try to be at the highest level for folks, they can drill down. But the very first one addresses what you mentioned that Jesse Eisinger observed. The first one is really about mindset. So it's about creating a special division within Main Justice, within U.S. Department of Justice, that's focused on big money crimes. And I'm using that term, or elite crime, so that I can get away from this what is white collar crime business. And so that I can kind of put all together things like that are separated now, ending the silos between, this narrow, like I'm just doing bank fraud versus someone who's doing money laundering. And it's like, why shouldn't you be, if they're the usual suspects, why aren't you looking at them in an integrated way? And to put, public corruption is often separate. Well, why? Who are the people involved in public corruption? Why are they involved? So one thing is to put them together. And when you put this unit together, then you fund it with the resources and the people it needs. You create dedicated FBI folks. And you do part of what Emma is mentioning, which is like, well, what about the agencies? You create a pipeline, a regular conversation instead of a competition between the Securities Exchange Commission, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the Post Office, any of the other, Department of Justice, the FDA, the EPA, the alphabet soup of agencies. And you create good relationships so that the referrals aren't a big deal. I think it's hard to make a criminal referral, but you keep the pipeline open so the people at the DOJ can independently start investigating without the need for some sort of official referral when you may have an agency head who doesn't want that, right? So there's that.
How do you like what gets a crime to be handled by that group? Is it, you mentioned a couple of different types of crimes, and I understand the logic behind, like, if I'm, my skill set in dealing with money laundering is going to be very similar to foreign corrupt practices, is going to be very similar to bank fraud, is going to be very similar to perhaps like bribery. Bribery is pretty straightforward. So like, how do you get the money there, and what are they trying to do with it? Is it a dollar amount? Or is it?
That's a good point, right? And not only is it the expertise that might be similar, but you're talking about the same, with the common nucleus of facts, that the same sort of mess of corruption has all these different crimes. And so you're saying, it should absolutely be a certain kind of dollar threshold or a harm threshold, the people harmed. And also part of what you do is you say, why the heck is a DOJ dealing with drug crimes? Like, why aren't those at the state level? Why don't we take some of the money that should be that and give it to the states to create rehab facilities and drug courts and all the rest of it? But part of what, you've got to create some kind of threshold for what, and those guidelines could be created, but you wouldn't tell the world what those threshold guidelines were.
Because you don't want people taking out $9,999 so they don't get reported. Right. Yeah, that type of thing. Okay.
But what you're also doing with this unit, because this is sort of the most important part of it, is you're letting people know that they're being measured. The people who are bringing cases, they're being measured on not on how many cases they close, but on a different metric, which is being willing to, not be afraid and take some of these things to court. And what that means is, not taking the policy like the deferred prosecution and non-prosecution policies, where we claim that we're really interested, and this was updated by Sally Yates, there's this claim that we're going to go after individual offenders, but really making that a priority. And you can create incentives so these things don't get settled. Or you can take there's no reason why DOJ can't decide to bring a test case in early, not well after the fact. An example would be, the DEA noticed, the Drug Enforcement Agency noticed prescription opioid problems early on when OxyContin was being pushed and when they were not disclosing their marketing materials to the FDA. How'd that fall through the cracks? It's always the case where sort of, we always hear, we didn't know this would happen, but it's new products that are gaining rapid acceptance. Take a look at those. So I think it's not just about how much money, because then it's too late.
Right. We just lost your audio. Jennifer, we just lost your audio. Can you hear us?
We go on.
Oh, sorry. We just lost your audio for a second. But I should say, just to remind people in terms of that OxyContin issue, not only did the DEA, were they not aware of sort of like spikes in the deliveries of OxyContin in certain areas, there was enough awareness that these distributors who are in between the producers and basically the doctors and the pharmacies, they lobbied to get the law changed in terms of their culpability. There was so much time. Oh, we just lost her. Brendan, can we try and, Matt, can we try and reconnect?
Yeah, we'll work on that. I think she might have had a connection issue at the end there.
Okay.
I do think it's interesting, though. I mean, it's the dividing of responsibility in that area, but it's also the dividing of culpability too, and the desire to do anything about it when it's so scattered. Jennifer's back.
Jennifer's back. Okay. So sorry, we lost you there for a moment, but all right. So, this idea of you don't want to necessarily make it a dollar figure because you want to be able to get the crime. You want to be able to stop the crime before it actually, is pegged at a dollar amount. And so what give us a sense of some of the other things that can happen at that point. You congregate sort of a same skill set and things that are logical in terms of you don't silo this stuff enough. In the way that it is, and you create relationships with agencies so that you're not waiting for a criminal referral. You have a sense of what's coming down the pike. What are the other steps we can take?
Can you still hear me, or are you having trouble?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So the first thing is getting that unit. The second thing is to give them the tools they need. So we've had the erosion.
Oh gosh, we've lost her again. Very strange.
Unfortunate.
Are you sorry? Is that better?
Yeah,
that's better. There you go.
I hear you.
I'm sorry. I think what happened is my phone was hooked up to the Bluetooth, and my daughter went to take my car, and I must be broadcasting over her car speaker. I mean,
well, there you go. That's
sorry. So the idea is to give these tools, sharpen the tools. So the bribery statute was eroded over many years, but most recently with the governor of Virginia being able to basically get all kinds of money and goodies for access, but it was not considered unlawful under our federal bribery laws because it was not in exchange for an official act. It was just access. That can be fixed. The other
okay. I'm afraid we're going to have to say goodbye, Jennifer, because we keep having this problem. Maybe you can disconnect your Bluetooth.
Yeah, let me do that. I'm sorry. I'm going to disconnect it right now. I didn't know it was on. Sorry, guys.
Don't worry.
Bear with us, folks.
Pandemic issues, per usual. We're all facing them.
Let's see. I think I'm good now, but I just have to find you. Okay.
There we go. All right, great.
Is that good?
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, good.
So, and so you were saying that we need to enhance the bribery statutes and redefine that statutorily speaking.
Yes.
As it were.
And that's not hard to do. It's ironically, when there was the first problem with the statute, it was Scalia who just said, here's how we fix it. Congress didn't do it. The other example is our honest services wire fraud statute. That's a kind of a mouthful, but this is, Bridget Kelly, her conviction was overturned in the Bridgegate case. And again, this idea with the current fraud statute allows public officials to use public resources to exact revenge, to help elevate their own career, to help their boss, in this case, Chris Christie, and harm the public. And that's not, and to lie about it. And that doesn't qualify as honest services fraud. And there's, again, a way to fix the statute. So there are other types of examples like that.
I got to say, a little bit skeptical of any changes from a statutory standpoint, particularly since it's going to be written by people who would necessarily maybe benefit from the way that it is now. Let's just take the third one and wrap it there. People can read the book to get more, but
okay.
Create more visibility and protections for victims of white collar crime. I mean, that seems to be like a big one, right? Like we need to understand that this crime is in many ways impacts our society far more so than what we perceive to be, street crime.
And this is the hardest thing to do, to create this kind of visibility, because even now, I mean, the pandemic is the lesson. You can put night after night the names of people who died of COVID, and many of them might have been in cities where there were these big rallies or where restaurants are open. And yet people just don't, they sort of say, well, they made their choices, or it's very hard to not blame victims. And I think it's just going to take more time in getting it more into the culture, especially thinking about victims of things like insider trading or tax evasion. It would be my goal really to see not just, all these stories about how the wealthy, squirrel their money away offshore, but the local communities who can't pay for the public school teacher to teach art, or the roads that are not repaired and how much money you spend because of potholes. I mean, there's a way to do it. But I think it's hard to draw those lines, and I would love if it could happen.
All right, folks can check out Big Dirty Money for the other three points that you put in there. But lastly, what don't we need some type of change in society to implement a lot of these? I mean, I think obviously ones that the executive could do might be easier than others, but there needs to be a wholesale rejection of the idea of too big to jail that Lenny Brewer and Eric Holder suggested why we couldn't basically jail bankers.
Yeah, I mean, I think society is very frustrated with that. And I don't think, when you watch the film, The Big Short, and they said, the very last, spoiler alert, turn this off if you haven't seen it. But the last line is no bankers went to jail. And then everybody was like, angry, right, in the film. I mean, that it's still, people are still very frustrated by that. So I think that it's really about something that Matt Taibbi wrote in the book, The Divide, which is we just love our celebrities, right? And I don't know why. No matter how tacky or selfish or ridiculous they are, when they have so much excess, they want, they want attention, and people seem to want to give it to them instead of, say, share more fairly. This inequality is not going to work in our society. So I don't know how we get there. I look at this as trying to, bend the arc over the next 50 to 100 years. I mean, we're stuck in the middle of this, and it won't be easy.
Well, I think, the part of the problem is that the sort of the mechanisms in which we communicate these ideas broadly have been in the hands of the same class of people who have been committing these crimes. And, people generally don't operate, broadly speaking, against their class interests. Jennifer Taub, we will put a link to Big Dirty Money, the shocking injustice, unseen cost of white collar crime at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and sorry for the technology glitch.
No
it's
problem.
2020.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Much.
All right, folks, quick break. Be right back. So Fox and Friends, they were very upset this weekend, and they felt bad for the president because
he's their buddy.
He's their buddy, and he worked so hard to convince the American public that he should be president, and cannot really come up with well, I guess there's been one case that he won, but it was very narrow out of like 55 now or something.
Changed like 10 ballots, and some of them might have been in favor of Biden. So just winning all over the place.
Here is Rachel Campos Duff and Pete Hegseth and Fox and Friends. I think Will Kane's there too, talking about how sad they feel for the president.
I just feel for the president. I see the pain and the frustration. You do everything you're supposed to do. You run the country well. You campaign your heart out while the other guy's in a basement. And then in the end, fraud and shenanigans at the local level, you're robbed. And we've all been robbed, because when the elections don't go well, when there's fraud, when there's these kinds of shenanigans, we all lose.
Yeah, frustrated but remains undeterred. He called it rigged, a sham, a shame, and a couple of times he said he worried about the country having an illegitimate president. And if 77% of Republicans and Trump supporters believe the election was stolen, where do you go from there? And that certainly is